Have you ever wondered why the moment you pull back, the moment you choose distance, a man suddenly begins to see what he had been blind to all along? For as long as you are near, his mind swims in familiarity, his ego cloaked in the illusion of control. But when you step away, something primal is awakened. The silence, the absence, the space you create, these things are not passive. They are active forces, like a mirror held before his unconscious, revealing to him what he could not or would not face. Carl Jung spoke of the unconscious as a living entity within the psyche, guiding us with symbols and shadows. Distance is one such symbol. It tears away the veil of comfort, forcing a man to encounter the raw weight of his projections. When you remove yourself, you are not merely leaving a space empty. You are activating in him the ancient fear of loss, the confrontation with his own dependency, the quiet horror of realizing that he cannot bend another's will without consequence. The ego crumbles when its source of validation withdraws. What once seemed ordinary, a woman's presence, her words, her laughter, suddenly takes on the glow of something sacred, because it has vanished. The absence becomes louder than your presence ever was. And in that silence, his unconscious begins to whisper truths he had long suppressed. In those moments, he starts to recognize the projections he had cast upon you. Perhaps he saw you as a caretaker, as a source of comfort, as a mirror to his own fragile ego. Jung taught us that the anima, the feminine image within a man's psyche, guides his attraction, his obsession, his confusion. When you step back, you trigger that anima, but not in its idealized form. You awaken its shadow. Suddenly he is left face to face with his own wounds, his fear of abandonment, his hunger for validation, his struggle with inadequacy. He realizes, perhaps for the first time, that his need for you was never simply about love, it was about avoiding himself. And what about you? Do you see the power in this? When you choose distance, you are not punishing him, you are honoring yourself. You are declaring that your energy is not an endless reservoir for someone else's unconscious projections. You are saying, without words, that you exist beyond his story, beyond his needs, beyond his fragile grasp on control. This is the essence of feminine power in its silent form. It is not loud, not dramatic, not chasing. It is the quiet dignity of stepping away and letting the absence do the speaking. Men often live in the illusion that they have time, that a woman's patience is infinite, that her presence is a given. But your choice to withdraw shatters that illusion. It confronts him with the reality of impermanence, the truth that what is not cherished can vanish. This truth pierces deeper than any argument, deeper than any words you could throw at him. Silence cuts sharper than anger, distance burns colder than rejection. For in that coldness, he sees himself reflected, alone, small, uncertain. This is not cruelty. This is clarity. Stoic philosophy reminds us that what is within our control is our own choice, our own response, our own dignity. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. When you choose distance, your thoughts are painted with self-respect, with boundaries, with the recognition that you are not here to be consumed. And in turn, his thoughts, his restless nights, his quiet moments of regret, are dyed with the awareness that he has underestimated what he cannot replace. Every man confronted with distance will respond differently. Some will collapse into denial, seeking distractions, running into the arms of others, desperate to cover the wound. Others will rage, their egos unwilling to accept the blow. But the rare few, the ones willing to confront themselves, will descend into their own depths. They will begin shadow work, though they may not call it that. They will ask themselves why your silence feels unbearable, why your absence echoes louder than the presence of others. And in that reflection, they may find glimpses of the truth, that their longing is not for you alone, but for the parts of themselves they buried long ago. You see, your distance does not merely create longing. It creates a psychological initiation. It forces him into a liminal space where he cannot rely on his old patterns, his old games, his illusions of superiority. He stands there, stripped of the comfort of your constant presence, and realizes that something in him must change, or he will forever be haunted by what he lost. And so, the paradox emerges: by stepping away, you give him the greatest opportunity to awaken. But that awakening is not your responsibility. It is his burden to carry, his mountain to climb, his shadow to face. For your role is not to guide him, heal him, or rescue him. Your role is to remain rooted in your own worth, knowing that your absence is more powerful than false presence, that your distance speaks the truth his ears refuse to hear. When distance lingers, a man begins to unravel in ways he never anticipated. At first, he may brush it off, convincing himself that you will return, that your silence is only temporary, that he still holds the same power over you he once believed he had. But the longer the space stretches, the louder the questions grow inside of him. Why does her absence feel like a weight pressing on my chest? Why does her silence echo louder than her words ever did? Why does the ordinary world now seem stripped of its color? He doesn't yet realize that he is staring into the mirror of his own psyche. Carl Jung explained that we do not see others as they are, but as we are, through the filter of our unconscious projections. For a man, the woman who withdraws often carries the weight of his anima, the inner feminine archetype that holds his deepest longings, his idealized visions of love, and his hidden wounds. When you step away, you are not merely removing yourself, you are tearing the projection from his grasp. He is left with the hollow realization that he cannot control or contain the image he has built of you. And that dissonance forces him inward. Distance forces him into contact with the parts of himself he has always avoided. The silence is merciless because it cannot be argued with. Unlike words, silence cannot be debated or twisted. Unlike presence, absence cannot be ignored. It is absolute. And so he begins to wrestle with truths that have no escape. He realizes how much he depended on your energy to sustain his ego, how often he leaned on your attention to mask his insecurities, how casually he dismissed your value because he assumed you would always remain. But here is the deeper truth: your choice to create distance is not about him. It is about you. It is an act of individuation, the Jungian process of becoming whole, of stepping away from roles and projections that do not serve your soul. By refusing to be consumed, you step into your own sovereignty. You send a silent message to the unconscious masculine: I will not be your crutch. I will not be your mirror. I will not be your source of validation at the cost of my essence. That message, unspoken but undeniable, is the very thing that shakes him awake. You may not see it, but your absence reorders his world. Suddenly, every woman he encounters is measured against the one who walked away. He may try to fill the void with distraction, but nothing resonates, because nothing carries the weight of your distance. It is not you he chases, it is the reflection of his own inadequacy that haunts him. Distance is the crucible in which he confronts the shadow of himself, the boy who fears abandonment, the man who hides behind arrogance, the human who cannot bear to face his own emptiness. Seneca once wrote that it is not the things themselves that disturb us, but the views we take of them. Your absence is not an action against him, it is simply your choice, your boundary, your freedom. But his mind interprets it as loss, rejection, failure. His ego bleeds because the story he told himself, about his control, his desirability, his importance, collides with the reality that you have chosen something greater than proximity, self-respect. For you, the beauty of distance lies in its quiet power. You do not need to shout, to explain, to justify. You simply step back, and the psychological forces unfold on their own. It is a kind of alchemy: your silence transforms his awareness. He begins to realize that presence is a gift, not a guarantee. That respect is not owed but earned. That love cannot thrive in control, but only in reverence. And here is the paradox you must never forget: distance elevates you. It is not weakness, but strength. It is not rejection, but refinement. By choosing space, you remind both him and yourself that you are not defined by his recognition. You are whole without him, complete without his gaze, radiant without his validation. This realization is what terrifies him most, not simply that you are gone, but that you never truly needed him. When a woman embraces distance, she awakens the archetype of the unattainable, the eternal reminder that love cannot be possessed, only honored. This archetype is etched into the male psyche, sparking desire, obsession, even despair. Yet beneath it all lies a deeper truth. He begins to recognize, however dimly, that what he longed for in you was never yours to give. It was his own soul calling to him, reflected through you, demanding he face himself at last. The longer distance endures, the more it reshapes the architecture of his psyche. At first, he resists. He clings to distractions, throws himself into work, or seeks solace in fleeting connections, hoping to bury the echo of what has been lost. Yet, the unconscious is relentless. It does not allow evasion forever. Jung taught that what we resist not only persists, but grows stronger, and your absence becomes precisely that, a magnified presence he cannot escape. It appears in his dreams, in the silence between conversations, in the quiet moments when no one else is watching. What unsettles him most is not merely the loss of you, but the confrontation with himself. In your distance, he meets the shadow he has avoided his whole life. That shadow holds his insecurities, his fear of inadequacy, his dependence on validation. Your presence once softened its edges, masking its weight. But now the mask is gone. He begins to realize that what he called love may have been attachment, that what he called strength was often pride, and that what he called independence was, in truth, avoidance of his deepest vulnerability. Distance strips him bare. It dismantles the illusions he used to stand tall. The silence shows him how much he depended on your constant affirmation. The absence reveals how fragile his ego truly was. He sees the truth, the relationship was never just about you, it was about the parts of him he projected onto you, the caretaker, the muse, the mirror of worth. When you step away, all those projections come crashing down, leaving him to confront the hollow places inside himself. And what does this mean for you? It means that by choosing distance, you are no longer playing the role his psyche assigned you. You are no longer carrying his wounds for him, no longer softening the blows of his own emptiness. This is not cruelty, it is liberation, for both of you. In creating space, you force the masculine psyche to face itself, whether it is ready or not. You are no longer a balm to soothe his ego, but a mirror he cannot look away from. This realization burns him. He begins to recognize that a woman's presence is not a given, it is a gift. And once that gift is withdrawn, nothing else feels quite as alive. Your absence reveals the depth of his dependency, a dependency he masked with control or indifference. It unsettles him because it exposes the truth he fears most, that he never truly possessed you, and that possession was never possible to begin with. Epictetus, the Stoic philosopher, reminded us that freedom lies in understanding what is within our control. For you, the act of stepping back is the ultimate embodiment of that wisdom. You control your energy, your attention, your presence. And by withdrawing them, you declare that you are sovereign over yourself. For him, however, the lesson cuts deeper. He is confronted with the reality that he cannot control another's choice, and that realization is as humbling as it is terrifying. It is here, in this crucible of distance, that transformation becomes possible. Some men collapse under the weight of it, scrambling to numb themselves, to avoid the mirror. Others awaken. They recognize that your silence is not punishment, but invitation. It is the universe pressing them to confront their shadow, to grow beyond the fragile ego, to rise into a fuller version of themselves. Your distance becomes the teacher he never asked for but desperately needs. But make no mistake, this transformation is not your responsibility. Whether he chooses growth or stagnation is his alone. You are not his savior, not his healer, not his mother. You are a woman who has chosen self-respect over compromise, sovereignty over submission, clarity over confusion. Your distance is not a test for him, it is a truth for you. And yet, in the alchemy of that truth, he realizes what he once took for granted. He begins to see that what he thought was ordinary was sacred. That your laughter was rare, your attention precious, your love unrepeatable. It dawns on him, painfully, that distance is not just space, it is revelation. He realizes, often too late, that the woman who chooses herself cannot be caged, cannot be diminished, cannot be replaced. With time, the distance no longer feels like a pause to him, it becomes a chasm. At first, he may have believed he could bridge it easily, that you would return on your own, that silence was only temporary. But as the days turn to weeks, the reality settles in like an uninvited guest: you are not waiting, and you are not chasing. The weight of that realization sinks deeper than any argument could. He begins to feel the full force of impermanence, that eternal truth the Stoics spoke of, that nothing is promised, and everything can be taken. This is when clarity strikes him with cruel precision. He looks back at the countless small moments, the words left unspoken, the affection dismissed, the patience overlooked. Distance sharpens memory, and memory becomes torment. Suddenly, every time he disregarded your presence replays in his mind, not as casual habits but as missed opportunities. He realizes, often too late, that neglect is not a neutral act, it is erosion. And now the structure he thought indestructible has collapsed. Your absence forces him to confront another painful truth, that love is not possession but recognition. For so long he may have believed that having you near meant you belonged to him, that proximity equaled permanence. But distance dismantles this illusion. He begins to understand that the only way to hold a woman of depth is not to grasp tighter but to honor her freedom, her worth, her individuality. And because he failed to honor it, he now tastes the bitterness of loss. Jung reminds us that the anima, the inner feminine within a man's psyche, is not only the source of his attraction but also the guide to his transformation. When you step back, you awaken this anima in its most haunting form. She no longer comes to him as comfort, but as absence. She becomes the reminder that he cannot escape his own incompleteness by clinging to another. Through your distance, the unconscious forces him into an initiation he never sought, to face his own lack, to walk the lonely path of self-confrontation, or else remain shackled to denial. Meanwhile, your choice carries its own power. To withdraw is not to flee, it is to stand firm in your sovereignty. You remind him and yourself that love is not a contract to absorb another's wounds, nor is it a duty to remain in spaces that diminish you. In stepping away, you embody the sacred feminine in its most profound form, the one who nurtures not through endless sacrifice, but through boundaries, silence, and self-possession. This archetype unsettles him because it cannot be controlled. It stands as both mirror and mystery, revealing the limits of his grasp. The most profound part of this realization for him is not just that you are gone, but that you left without needing to explain. Words could be debated, argued, twisted. But silence is final. It leaves him no foothold, no loophole, no comfort. He recognizes that it was not anger that ended things, not conflict, but choice. And that realization, your freedom to choose distance, is what cuts him deepest. For it reminds him of the truth he never wanted to face: you were never his possession. You were always your own. In the stillness of distance, he begins to envy what he once overlooked: your independence, your ability to stand alone, your refusal to be consumed. It dawns on him that strength does not look like dominance or control. Strength looks like detachment, like the power to walk away when something no longer aligns with your soul. He realizes, perhaps too late, that true feminine power lies not in yielding endlessly, but in the courage to withhold, to step back, to say without words, "I choose myself." And so, distance teaches him more than presence ever could. It teaches him that relationships are fragile, that attention is sacred, that love cannot survive entitlement. It teaches him that the woman who walks away leaves behind not just silence, but a shadow that lingers for years, whispering of what could have been if only he had awakened sooner. As distance deepens, the man finds himself standing at a crossroads within his own psyche. One path leads back into denial, into distractions and shallow replacements, where he can numb the ache by convincing himself you were never that important. But the other path, the harder, narrower one, leads into the heart of his shadow. If he dares to walk it, he will discover that what torments him is not merely your absence, but the absence of his own wholeness. Jung spoke of individuation as the great task of every human soul, the journey toward becoming complete within oneself. Your withdrawal forces him to confront whether he will take that journey or remain forever fractured. In his sleepless nights, the questions haunt him. Why did her silence unsettle me more than her words? Why does her distance reveal my need more than her presence ever did? Why does her absence feel like the unveiling of my own emptiness? Slowly, painfully, he begins to understand that the power he thought he held over you was an illusion, and that the real power has always belonged to you, the power to step away, to deny him the comfort of certainty, to stand untethered in your own self-possession. This is the secret terror and allure of the feminine archetype. She represents both creation and withdrawal, nurture and detachment. When you chose distance, you embodied the mystery that men have chased for centuries, the reminder that love cannot be owned, only honored. He realizes that his attempts to contain you, to take you for granted, to treat your presence as inevitable, were acts of blindness. And blindness, when exposed, brings regret sharp enough to wound. But here is the paradox: in the fire of regret, transformation is forged. Distance is not only loss for him, it is invitation. He sees now that if he is to love at all, truly, deeply, without projection, he must first know himself. He must stop seeking his anima outside of him and begin to integrate her within. This means confronting the parts of him he abandoned long ago, the vulnerability he buried, the tenderness he shamed, the fear he disguised as pride. Without this work, no woman's presence will ever satisfy him, for what he seeks in another is a reflection of the soul he refuses to face. For you, his realization is secondary. Your distance is not a strategy to manipulate his growth, but a declaration of your own. You no longer carry the weight of teaching him, healing him, or convincing him of your worth. By choosing space, you have aligned with something far greater than his recognition, you have aligned with your own individuation. You step into the archetype of the sovereign woman, the one who belongs first to herself, who loves freely but never at the expense of her soul. He feels the sting of this sovereignty. He recognizes that while he sought to claim you, you were always beyond claim. While he imagined control, you were always free. And now, in your absence, he faces the truth that haunts every man who has underestimated a woman of depth: she will not wait, she will not beg, she will not diminish herself to suit the fragility of his ego. The Stoics would say that fate is indifferent, but virtue is everything. For you, virtue lies in self-respect, in honoring the boundaries that protect your essence. Distance is not punishment, it is preservation. It keeps your spirit whole, your dignity intact, your worth unquestioned. And it teaches him, more profoundly than any words could, that love is never sustained through control but through reverence. So, he begins to realize, what slipped through his hands was not just a woman, but an opportunity. The opportunity to meet love with maturity, to honor presence instead of assuming permanence, to grow beyond the boy who clings into the man who cherishes. Whether he rises to that opportunity is not yours to decide. That is his journey, his burden, his test. And you? You stand unshaken. Distance has not diminished you, it has revealed you. It has shown you the quiet strength of choosing yourself, the profound truth that love without freedom is bondage, and that your soul was never meant to be contained. You walk forward, radiant in your autonomy, embodying a lesson he will carry in his unconscious long after you are gone, that the woman who chooses distance does not disappear, she becomes unforgettable. Over time, distance transforms from a temporary disruption into a permanent truth. He begins to realize that what once felt like a pause has become an ending, and that endings are not merely events, they are revelations. In the silence you left behind, he discovers an entirely new landscape of awareness, one that he never expected to face. It is not simply about missing you, it is about seeing himself reflected in the void where you used to stand. And what he sees unsettles him deeply. He notices how fragile his confidence was, how much of his sense of self rested on your attention, your affection, your presence. Without it, the mask slips, and he is left staring at the boy beneath the man, the boy who feared abandonment, who equated control with love, who mistook comfort for permanence. Your distance rips away the illusion, revealing that he was not as secure, not as powerful, not as complete as he pretended to be. It is a cruel gift, but a gift nonetheless, for it forces him into the painful recognition that true strength does not come from holding on to another, but from standing whole within oneself. For you, however, the story is not about his reckoning, it is about your liberation. To choose distance is to reject the lie that your value is measured by how much you are needed. It is to declare that your energy will no longer be drained in the endless work of sustaining another's ego. In that silence, you discover something far greater than his realization, your own. You learn that peace is not found in convincing someone of your worth, but in knowing it so deeply that no rejection, no loss, no distance can shake it. This is the essence of Jung's teaching on individuation, the path toward becoming whole. When you step back, you reclaim the parts of yourself you gave away in compromise. You retrieve the fragments of your identity that were lost in the role of caretaker, partner, or muse. You gather them into yourself, and in that gathering, you become complete. His realizations may come slowly, through regret and longing, but yours come swiftly, through clarity and freedom. And yet, paradoxically, your choice ignites his deepest recognition. He begins to see that love is not sustained by possession, but by presence freely given. He learns, too late perhaps, that to honor a woman is to cherish her autonomy, not to consume it. He realizes that love cannot be built on entitlement, because entitlement corrodes intimacy at its root. What he took for granted becomes sacred in hindsight, and what he dismissed becomes unforgettable. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." Distance brings this same urgency to him. He realizes that love, like life, is fleeting, and that arrogance toward it leads only to emptiness. The silence you created is not just absence, it is a meditation on mortality, on impermanence, on the truth that nothing is guaranteed. This awakening is heavy, but it is real, and it marks the beginning of his transformation, if he chooses to accept it. But here is the final, unshakable truth: whether he transforms or not is no longer relevant to you. You do not walk backward to see if he has grown. You do not pause your journey to see if he has awakened. You move forward, rooted in your own sovereignty, knowing that his realizations are his burden to carry, not your responsibility to witness. The woman who chooses distance does not wait for validation, she creates her own. And so, his final recognition dawns: the greatest loss was never your presence, but the revelation that you never needed him to be whole. That truth echoes louder than any word you could have spoken. It haunts him, not as cruelty, but as clarity, the kind of clarity that stays with a man long after the woman has gone. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.